This is Super Robinson Brothers, the podcast companion to our game review webcomic. I'm Nick.
I'm Nate.
And we're real-life brothers who play a different game every week, and then we review it as a webcomic, now on SuperRobinsonBros.com. And this week, we're talking about Prey. Prey's a pretty different game than I thought it was, Nate.
This is a terrible joke. Don't do this. You talked about this.
So yeah, this is not really a religious experience. It's more of a first-person horror kind of thing.
That must have been quite a shock to you. I'm sorry that it didn't turn out to be that first-person prayer that you
it was quite a shock
for.
to my system, if you will. But we'll get to that here in just a little bit. So, like I said, it's kind of a horror game. I almost said movie because it's pretty cinematic. It's created by Arcane. And published by Bethesda back in 2017, and we are playing it in the year of 2020.
That's right.
So we're, as usual, right on the ball.
Hot on the cusp, Nick, right here.
You definitely come to us for your hard-hitting game news and quick takes. So,
you think there's anybody out there who's like, I don't buy games unless the Robinson Brothers, validate it, because those poor people haven't played a game in like 6 months, and they're just. I hope not. I pray that
they're out there. They just don't know we are yet. So
that's true. Fair enough.
Yeah. I think, to be fair, though, I do think a lot of people put things on their backlog. It's kind of how we started this whole thing, right? And they're like, oh, I'll get to that eventually. So we're just helping you weed through that backlog.
There you go.
And we'll see whether or not this is one that you want to actually pick up. So, Nate, why don't you played this game a little bit longer. We both played this one, and I ended up kind of ditching this one, but why don't you give us the usual rundown? What's this thing all about?
So yeah, Prey is a first-person, I would say adventure-ish kind of game. It's an action-adventure game, very much in the vein of something like a BioShock. You much. Yeah, you play. Oh God, what's her name?
It's cool too because you start it up and you choose whether or not you want to be a he or a her.
That's true.
Which is
yes,
super awesome.
That's a great point. Yeah, I was playing as the female. I forget your character's name, but
Morgan Yu.
Thank you, Morgan
which is
Yu.
Intelligently, it works either way.
Yeah, that's great. That's really.
And that's
smart.
YU, not YOU, because that would be strange.
So you play Morgan Yu, who's kind of you're on this space. There's a little bit of a setup here that I'm not going to spoil. It's actually a pretty interesting little startup. But you're on the space station.
It was the best part, to be honest.
And things have gone horribly wrong, as they tend to do. And you have to find out how to resolve the situation. And it's gone wrong in the same vein as a lot of those other things. In this case, it is aliens that have found their way onto the space station and have pretty much wrecked life for the inhabitants of the space station. And you've got to go through
wrecked life
the environment,
as in taking it.
Go through the environment and collect a bunch of abilities and unlocks to make yourself more powerful, but also finishing up these little side quests here and there. And yeah, it feels a lot like a BioShock game to me in terms of
yes,
like
you're describing one.
You still have some gunplay. You have some like supernatural abilities. You're going around completing main missions and then side quests. It's like one large open world connected by it's kind of like transit centers that you can kind of go back and forth between, almost like a little fast travel system. But that's pretty much it. I mean, it also feels a lot like a Deus Ex game where you have. I mean, BioShock is kind of the same way too, where you have multiple ways to achieve your objectives. Like the level design is very intricate, and you can maybe you're gonna level up your hacking ability so you can get past this door. Maybe you're gonna level up your strength ability and you can just push that door open. It's one of those kind of games, and it kind of definitely has RPG elements to it.
The skill trees are pretty robust.
Yeah, definitely, and that's pretty much it. It kind of starts off. You said it was a horror game. It definitely has horror elements for sure. It's definitely
scary.
Not. Well, yeah, there is one thing in particular.
There's some jumps.
Yeah,
the jumps, they get them going.
So we're going to try to avoid major spoilers here, but there's some things that are just about like how the basic game functions that I think are going to be unavoidable. And what Nick's talking about, the scariest thing, and this is one of the first things you see in this game is the most basic enemy type, and that's called a mimic. And those things can, like their name implies, mimic objects in the environment. So you're just like wandering around, like just whistling Sweet Dixie to yourself, like you normally do. Yeah, I'm wandering. Yeah, totally.
That is a way to play a game.
Hey man, I'm on the last living survivor on this space station. I'm just gonna enjoy myself. And next thing you know, this mug.
There's a lot of time alone. A lot of time alone, which adds to this element.
That's a good point. It is like many of these games. Like you're not necessarily the last inhabitant, but you are rarely are you running into people. So you're navigating this environment. It's really quiet and spooky, and then all of a sudden this mug that's next to you just leaps into this very head crab from Half-Life looking
that's right
terrifying thing, and it's leaping at you.
Sole purpose is to latch onto your brain and murder you or something like that. And it could be a mug. It could be any object, really. A lamp, a desk.
Nick, list them all, why don't you?
Okay, yeah. Okay, good idea. Yeah, in a space station, there are all kinds of objects. So you don't know, right? So it's pretty spooky.
It definitely that'll get you right off the bat, for sure.
Oh, it definitely got me.
I spent most of my time, I felt like, in that first couple of hours. Like, it's a fairly long game, but like, I swear to God, the first 3 or 4 hours of the game for me were just crawling through environments, taking my little is it a hammer or is it a wrench? I think it's a wrench, and just
it's like a massive wrench,
smacking every object just out of caution.
Yeah. And I will say, like, it is a long game. Nate probably put. I guess you said like over 40 hours.
I put about 40 hours. So my Steam count says close to 50, but like I had definitely left it lingering in the background sometimes when I was performing tasks around the house. So yeah, I would say definitely between 30 and 40.
Given that pace and the fact that you're kind of or I guess that duration and the fact that the pace that you're going at, or at least early on, is at a crawl. It's definitely a formidable game. It's not one that you're going to kind of knock out pretty quickly.
Yeah, it's surprisingly long. I thought it was going to be... BioShock was a pretty long game, too. I mean, the original game, for sure.
True.
I feel like 2 is maybe a little shorter, Infinite, a little bit longer again. But they were... these are rich worlds that they're creating, and, they're very detailed. Like, again, that level design kind of, like, overlaps and intertwines in some really interesting ways. And that's true for this. I came away quite a big fan of the game, though it does have some repetition problems. I thought.
That's a good note. Like I haven't played a BioShock game in quite some time, and one of the things I don't remember it being quite so like rigid in terms of the, like you mentioned in the setup, that there's kind of a hub and you work your way out of the hub. This game felt like that was the thing, and you do that over and over again. There's a lot of backtracking and rechecking and going back. Was that something that BioShock had?
Not so much. There definitely were portions of them that did, like you would have different hubs, and then like you'd spend like an hour or two in this one hub and move on to the next hub. This game, like you said, it's much more one set environment. I think this is just this is a space station. All of a sudden, you're not gonna move on to another space station. Probably
it's not endless.
It's not endless. It is very much, though. It has aspects of like Metroidvania where you'll see this door that you just can't get into unless you level up eventually. It's not so much Metroidvania in the sense that you're gaining abilities by beating bosses and then coming back. It's just as you level up, you're strong enough that you can like move this refrigerator out of the way of this door or something like that.
Right.
So you do spend a lot of time in the same environments and finding new ways to access rooms that are either very apparent or not. I was quite positive on this game from very most of it, but it definitely felt slow and repetitive. And part of that is just like BioShock, you kind of run around collecting a bunch of stuff in your.
Oh my God.
So there's two things that kind of slowed down the gameplay. You've got this giant inventory of crap. Like, in BioShock, you'd run around eating hot dogs and eclairs out of the garbage.
Man, I'm starting to get a really clear sense of your favorite type of game. You're walking around whistling, eating things out of trash.
Yeah, okay. I'm not even talking about the games yet. That's just my Wednesday
on your way to the
it's on the way to work. But at BioShock, you're just like rifling through garbage cans and trunks and suitcases just for any scrap of food or ammo. And this game takes it even further, where it's like, okay, now actually the junk that you find, like, oh, this used cigar or paper, that stuff goes into your inventory, and that can be, it's actually valuable because you find these
use it later.
Recycling areas that you can take that and break it down into just basically like an element, and then you use those elements in these fabricators to make other items. So like all of a sudden now everything
or like
you
upgrades
come across,
and things like that.
Well,
like
yeah, it's like
upgrades.
weapon upgrades, or actually eventually you can use them to unlock actual like skill upgrades if you have enough items or enough these ores or whatever the heck the stuff, the recycling value you can turn it into actual upgrades, and that's hugely valuable. It also kind of breaks the game in an interesting way. All of a sudden, I'm getting ahead of myself, but between that, where you're not having to crawl through every object in the game, and just like a good Deus Ex game, there's like terminals with emails and whatnot that you have to read. I mean, I felt like every time I entered a new room, one, I had to do the sweep to check for mimics. Two, I had to look for every item in the game that I wanted to add to my inventory. Maybe do some inventory management if I was running out of space.
That's the other piece, is that the inventory wasn't gigantic, and so you're constantly doing the balance of like, well, I always want to keep this thing chock full because I can recycle most of these things. Yeah. But what's the most valuable thing in here? And it's just this constant, like, you're just constantly popping up the inventory and sitting in it for 3 minutes. Okay, next room.
Yeah.
That slows it so far down.
It did make me want to wish, like, and also the recyclers aren't that frequent, so it made me wish that I could just like recycle on my own, and not have to ferry things back and forth.
If it had like a different inventory or something like that, where it doesn't necessarily count, because a lot of this was like tiny junk, just tiny little weird things.
And they did do something smart, which is not everything takes up the same amount of space. Like not the used cigar doesn't take up the same amount of space as your giant gun, but so it has a little bit of that like Resident Evil 4 inventory Tetris. But yeah, I don't know. I know you hate that stuff in games. I was thinking about you the whole time. For me, I kind of like enjoy that, thoughtful. But yeah.
Yeah, you're right. I forgot about the fact, the Tetris piece, because like it literally has to fit in there. So then there'd be times where you're just like dropping stuff to then replace it or like swap it, and it's just it's just not fun.
Yeah, I mean, I think I like that stuff because I feel like it's an interesting constraint, but I like it where I'm not having to move garbage back and forth between this giant recycler every 5 minutes. Right. So,
I think that was the other thing, is like finding out that the time to complete the game was so vast. Like Nate said, there are emails upon emails. Like, there's so much depth in this story. Little plaques you could read, and because it's like a functioning space station, there's content everywhere. It's really cool stuff. It's a really interesting story, and you're piecing a lot of it together if you care about that stuff. But just the fact that knowing that there's 30 plus hours of that, plus this inventory stuff, plus all the the mimic stuff, it's just, oh man, it's a crawl. But unless you I think immediately sucked into it, like really resonating with the story.
Yeah, I don't think the game's as long as I made it out to be if you don't do everything. And I did most of the stuff in the game, but the thing I like about all the things we're talking about, as much as it does have a negative impact sometimes, is that it was a very believable world. Like, it felt like lived in, just in the way a lot of the BioShock world like feels real and authentic. Like, you get a sense of the people who lived in this space, and to that end, like a lot of the game's missions, the side missions especially, were these really interesting little vignettes of life on the station, or after the accident that led to all of this nightmare in space. You just find out that this person was stuck in their room and was trying to get out but was running out of air or food or whatnot.
Right.
Like that kind of stuff. I loved those things from BioShock, and this doesn't get quite as like supernatural as BioShock's, or as notable as BioShock's characters, I suppose, too. But yes, that stuff is very, it's as deep as you want to make it. Like, you could just like run past these rooms and be like, you know what, I don't care about this random person.
For the most part, that's true.
Keep my eye on the ball. But
because there are times where you have to like go look at a terminal to get a password or something like that, to get into a room that you've been trying to figure out how to get into, and then of course you got to read all the other 7 different emails. But yeah, but that's true. You can kind of make it pretty quick.
You can go mainline this game, I bet, in half the time. But that's kind of not what these games are made for. They're made for just unraveling the different layer of an onion after another.
So the other the other thing though in there, so I agree with you. The other thing in there though, I did find that the combat was a little repetitive as well.
Yeah.
Until there were some things that happened later on in the game to make it a little more deep. Like your engagements with the enemies were pretty sparse. And so, those are opportunities, I think, to really push the limit and make each one really unique and memorable. But I felt like I was doing the same thing over and over again. And it was actually the difficulty level I would describe as pretty tough.
Yeah, this is not a easy game, especially early on when you don't have many abilities. Like, you are running away from enemies sometimes.
Yeah, they're hitting you with some serious force, leaving a mark, and like most kind of horror games, you're often starved for, you can't just stand there and just keep blasting them. You're starved for ammo and things like that.
Yeah, the game has an interesting arc where, early on it's quite difficult. You're running away. Maybe you're using your environment to try to fight evenly with the enemies. Like, you can find turrets, and you have to set those up to try to fight for you. And then eventually, as you unlock more abilities, and again, once you can kind of create your own abilities, like your own skill points almost, you just start getting a massive amount of abilities, and now it becomes more of a toy where you can what way do I want to take on this enemy? I can go blast them in the face, this now super powerful shotgun, or I can use my more advanced weird abilities like telekinesis or telepathy and destroy them. And then it honestly it switches, and instead of becoming this intimidating battle, now they're trying to mix it up by throwing a bunch of guys at you. And that's I thought that was pretty good because they don't have that many in terms of variety of enemy encounter, and that did kind of drag on for me. And what makes even exploration harder, as you said, you backtrack a lot in this game, was that as you come back and as later portions of the game, enemies in areas and enemies that you cleared out earlier on are now repopulated with harder versions of those enemies, or a lot more of those enemies. And so it was man, I just want to get to this mission objective, and I know this area. I don't want to have to fight again. I'm
glad you mentioned that, because a lot of times you're also I think that's where that thing was. These are pretty big maps, and they're intricate. It's a space station, and there's a lot of depth in there, and so I'd be retracing my steps, and then I realized I'm in the wrong room, but then I had to fight all the enemies again, or whatever, the drones and things like that, and just it's tiresome.
Yeah, it definitely can get that way for sure by the end. And actually, by the very end, I was just running past people. I was like, you know what? I'm not even gonna bother with you. I'm just gonna keep going. I didn't know if that cat was out of the bag, but yeah, I agree. Once they sort of gave you more abilities, I thought it was a lot more interesting. But personally, by that time, I was kind of done with all the other things, and I'm just not wanting to put up with it. But so I felt like if they could compress this game into a 10 to 15 hour thing, it would be so strong. But the fact that it just kept going, for me, it was just too much. I'm like, I got the gist of it. It's really well polished. It's really well made. Great environments. Really interesting stuff. But oof. Yeah, my biggest problem with this game, and again, I feel like we're dragging on this game, but I actually still really liked it quite a bit. I wouldn't have spent 40 hours with it if I didn't like it.
True.
But my biggest problem with it is that it, from a story perspective, it starts off really strong. It's got a really interesting little beginning there, and then you're kind of sucked into the world and you want to explore. You realize just how rich it is, and then kind of not much happens for the middle 25 hours in my experience. And there's minor changes in the story, and really the bulk of the interest from the game comes from those little vignettes you find. And so it's I'm gonna have this little 30-minute encounter over here that's interesting, and then another 30-minute encounter over here, but they're all random and tied, not the through line of the game. The actual through line of the game, I felt like just kind of went dormant until the very, very end, and I don't know, that left kind of a bad taste in my mouth, where it's okay, well, really this story isn't complicated and wraps up, and actually the ending was fairly interesting, but dude, they actually don't even really get to the interesting stuff with it until after the credits have run. It just kind of ends ends with a whimper, and then you're like, okay, well, I guess I'm just done with this. And yeah, from a story perspective, it doesn't really progress. So I really wish.
I'm sure a lot of people bail out after during the credits.
I bet. So I still really like it, but yeah, I don't know. I wish it could have been half as long. I feel like it also suffered from like where BioShock I hate using BioShock as an example. Like Deus Ex is another
it felt
example.
so much like BioShock.
It really.
I haven't played Deus Ex, but it really feels a lot like it.
I was going to say both of those games do a great job of kind of mixing up the variety of the environments. Whereas this game, there were only a few that I felt like were different than just like generic space station area, and so it kind of. I don't know. It just felt like, oh, here we are, another area that's pretty much the same. And there were some notable rooms and stuff, but mostly, especially because you spend so much time in it, going back and forth. The stuff that was the most memorable to me was the stuff where you're actually leaving the space station and kind of going out EVA style. But that was pretty limited. There were some. I think the best moments were the big choreographed moments. Yeah. And obviously, by kind of definition, or I guess like the big reveal moments. So whether it's like the first time you're like really seeing the space station and it's presenting itself to you, or you're seeing like you're going outside, you're opening these big doors and things like that. Like those are the most memorable, awesome moments. But then everything else, is then just rinse and repeat, and it kind of then makes those areas less interesting over time, which you have to do. But I just wish it was more of those things in less time. Yeah. So I guess you ready to start talking about score? Not yet. I wanted to ask you about the gunplay. What did you think? Because this game is still a shooter most of the time.
That's true.
What did you think about the guns? Because I thought they're all over the place. But what was your thoughts?
I felt like the few that I ended up using, I felt like they all just kind of felt underpowered, and I mean I know that's part of the dynamic, but it didn't feel like they had a ton of. I didn't feel super powerful with wielding them, which for me a lot of the shooters that I like to play, you feel a little bit more, ready to go in there guns a-blazing, because that's often my strategy. It just didn't work, so I didn't find that they were that engaging and interesting and just kind of fun to play with. What about you?
I thought it started off weak, and I think that was by design, and as you got upgrades to your weapons and as you unlocked a couple of new ones, I thought it became much more interesting, but I still only ended up using a handful of them for the most part. But I thought that one thing worth mentioning for me was the goo gun. It was the glue gun. I forget if it was the glue or the goo gun.
I thought it was glue. Yeah.
Yeah, it just basically fires out this like stream of glue clumps that slow down enemies and kind of eventually freeze them.
It kind of looks like you're spraying like a spray foam insulation at these enemies.
Yes, great descriptor. And it's actually pretty ingenious because you use that and then swap back, because some of these guys are really damn fast.
And that technique you try to like freeze them up a little bit to stall them and slow them down, and then you pull out the big guns.
One of the things I haven't really talked about yet that I love about this game is that it doesn't like hold your hand in teaching you some things. It requires you to kind of think about your tools available to you, or the information available to you, or your skills, and combine those things. And that's true for the glue gun. Like the glue gun has another function that I like. Took me an embarrassingly long amount of time to kind of realize.
I probably never figured it out.
Well, okay. Cover your ears really quickly if you don't want to know anything about this game.
Spoiler alert.
But this is a more minor thing, but it's emblematic of how this game again just asks that you add two and two together to figure things out. And again, quick spoiler. You can use the glue gun to fire chunks of the stuff at like the environment. And then you use that as like a stepping stone to kind of navigate around or get access to like higher areas.
Oh, interesting. You figured it out though that you would spray it at like fire, like a little leak or something like that, and then it would patch it up.
Yeah,
okay.
You can. Yeah,
but you're actually creating like a platform.
Yeah, you can just dot it together to make almost like a bridge.
I never figured that out.
Or use it to hop on.
Bravo.
It's pretty smart. And that's true for a lot of the missions you undertake too. It's like, well, I have to get into this room.
What did you think about that other one then? Yeah, the little like dart gun.
Oh yeah,
it's like a Nerf gun.
There's it's like literally a Nerf gun almost, where it just fires darts that don't hurt anybody, and it's just like a distractor. I think I used that thing once. I
think I don't remember if I ended up doing it or if they just said you could, because again you're reading everything. Oh, here's a description of the gun. That's fun. But it was like you could shoot it to hit buttons that you can't reach.
Right. Yeah.
but I don't remember if I ever actually did that.
I tried that once and didn't have great success. I didn't use that thing hardly at all.
And then again, like, you're starving your inventory. You're like, well, should I keep this gun? Is this a joke gun? Is this for real? Is this glue thing important? Yep.
Yeah.
The guns were okay. I also found it clunky, though, switching weapons between the glue gun and then the more of the firepower.
Yeah.
I found that a bit clunky.
Yeah. It's definitely not like it's not like Doom combat. It's more deliberate. I'll use the glue gun, then I'll switch over to my shotgun and get a couple bursts in. Maybe then I'll go run away high, or I'll use one of my abilities to speed away. It's an interesting combat puzzle, but I don't know. It varying levels of complexity and not quite as smooth as you might expect from like a first person shooter. It felt a lot like, I don't know if you played Arcane Studios' other games recently, especially like Dishonored. It felt a lot like the shooting in that game, where it was like, it's an option of how you can undergo some of these combat encounters, or you can do something else. You can go stealthy and you can kind of avoid the thing or whatnot. But they're not; those games are more known for their worlds and how you interact with the environments. I can't believe I haven't talked about Dishonored until right now. They feel very similar.
It's the same studio,
a lot of DNA shared between these two games, for sure. Those are games, Nick. I don't know if you've played those, but I feel like you might like those more.
I think it's funny. I remember starting Dishonored, and for whatever reason, I never got into it. So I only played maybe an hour or two, I think. But now maybe I'm wondering if it's because it's built very similarly.
Yeah. The thing I like about Dishonored and Bioshock's more than Prey are that there's more interesting characters. I think this is maybe one of the bigger downfalls of this game, is like there's only one or two characters that are even recognizable as part of as important to the plot and unique.
Well, and that's because of the setup, right? Like that's the situation itself requires that it's sparse.
It doesn't require that it's sparse. Like there should be maybe it's just the fact that it's a largely realistic world, that there aren't like these crazy cartoony characters from Bioshock and Dishonored. Because I definitely remember characters from both of those games, and I feel like give me a month and I'll forget every character from this game.
Right.
The only thing that'll be memorable are some of the weird situations characters were in as a result of the predicament on the station here.
Right. Yeah, everything feels like it just kind of blends together, especially during that middle 25 hours. I mean, even in the fact that you forgot the character's name, but they're constantly referring to it. Constant.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
the last thing I want to talk about is that there's this interesting DLC for the game called Moon Crash.
I saw that.
You did not play that, right?
I did not.
I picked it up. And played a little bit of it, and I actually think it's really good. I want to play more of it. It's really different though. This is not just like, oh, here's another, I don't know, episode of the game or another environment.
That's what I assumed it was. Like here's more of the space station or a different space station or something like that. It's
an entirely different game using the mechanics and the world. It's basically a roguelike almost. It's like a run-based game where it takes all the abilities and weapons and enemies and actually adds to those. But then
it
does this thing. So one of I like the fact in the game that you get access to pretty much all the abilities over time, and you become super powerful. But it also makes that some of the decisions you make about what kind of character you want to build feel less important. And so this game says, okay, you got 5 characters. Each one of these characters is only going to have access to a subset of the abilities. So this guy is going to be really strong with telekinesis, but bad in combat. Or then they get guys who are the inverse of that.
Right.
And so then it asks you to kind of get through this. The premise of this is you're just trying to set this thing. You're trying to get through this environment with each of the 5 characters. The twist, though, is that each of those 5 characters are going in one after another through the same environment, and so you have to kind of conserve resources. If you go through the first guy, pick up all the weapons, use them all, grab all the ammo, leave this door locked, well, okay, fine. The first person got through, no problem. But then the second person, there's less ammo for them, less weapons.
Right.
And they have to find their own way, and maybe it doesn't fit their playstyle. And the game's constantly getting a little bit harder with each run. And your goal is to get through it with all 5 characters, from what I can tell. I haven't done that yet. I got kind of close my first time, but I'm pretty sure.
Are you switching between the characters and controlling them individually, or are they kind of on autopilot?
One after another. So after you complete your run with the first one, now you move on to the second one.
I see.
And the world's
are you choosing the sequence?
I don't think so. No, I don't think so. And the world's... Oh, no, you do choose a sequence. I'm sorry. You do. You unlock... Okay. You start with only 2 or 3 people unlocked. And you eventually get access to 5 as a result of completing different objectives within the world. But the goal is to get through with all 5 of them without dying. Because the world's changing around you, too. Like, it's randomly generated within a subset of itself. So like the enemies are in different places, or the weapons, or even the environments themselves are different. So again, it almost is a better game because it's not focused so much on a story that really doesn't progress in an interesting way. You're missing out on the world building and the vignettes for sure. But if you're just looking for gameplay here, this is the one you want almost, because it's just I don't think it's available standalone, unfortunately. It is a fascinating product as someone who's I make games. To see a DLC come out like this that completely changes the way that you play the game, and is not a standalone game almost. It's really fascinating. And I think I want to spend some more time with it. It's cool. It's very cool, and it finally it definitely switches the power dynamic with the game, because eventually, again, like, you become pretty powerful in the game where you're not really worried about individual enemies, and this one, you don't have access to all that stuff, and so you have to be very smart about how you, like, which battles you want to interact with and which ones you want to avoid.
That seems like such a great way to kind of remix all the core mechanics. I wonder how that thing was developed. Like, was it a reaction to the feedback that they were getting from the core game after it was launched? Was it?
Yeah,
I'm really curious. I almost wish that I had known that before I started and just started there. That sounds a lot more fun.
Yeah, it's very different. I don't know if you'd like it, because again, it's like it hardly has any story. It's more just mechanics, but yeah, it's a cool way of playing it. If what we've been talking about sounds interesting, but you don't want to play 40 hours of it, and you're more interested in like the Deus Ex gameplay, BioShock's world didn't do anything for you. I would check out Moon Crash. It's the big DLC.
Something that we haven't mentioned here, my apologies, is that this thing is both the Moon Crash and the core Prey game are they're on Steam, Xbox, and PlayStation, so you got a couple different options there.
Yep.
Cool. Well, Nate, let's talk about ratings.
So I think
we're going to have different ratings.
Yeah, I think I played a lot more of this game than you did, but I also still have problems with it. It's between a 3 and a 4 for me.
Yep, agreed. So a 3 is consider it, just to refresh on our scale, and a 4 is play it, which is well designed, enjoyable, polished, but we think that there's some minor concerns. So I'm at a 3, consider it, because I felt like those are far more than minor. The things that we talked about early on in the podcast about the inventory management stuff, just the pace of it, these to me are like core game design problems that, I mean, it's hard because I know that those things appeal to some people, and they're probably listening to me right now going, what are you talking about? That's the best part. But I just felt like they made it so much less fun, so much less playable. There weren't bugs or issues. I didn't run into technical issues, but I just, it was not good.
It pains me because this game is so well crafted in so many ways. It really is AAA experience, and just really intelligent. Again, great world, very believable, interesting mission design, but it just goes on, and it doesn't really add too much to it as it progresses. That, like, I would tell people to play those other games we talked about before I told people to play this one.
Yeah.
That's what it.
You talk about like BioShock and Deus Ex and stuff.
Yeah, Dishonored. Like, I think all those games scratch that same itch, but do it in a more memorable way. And that's really, that's unfortunate, because I think this game has some really amazing stuff in it. If you like those games, this becomes a 4 or a 5. I think.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But if you what?
But that's funny, because we like those games.
I really do, and that's why I put so much time into it. But like, if I'm telling the average person on the street, it's like, well, have you played those other ones first? Because if you still want more, go play Prey. You're gonna love Prey.
You know what? You just said that too, by the way, and I'm thinking this is our new segment. You're walking down the street.
Hello,
whistling,
random Joe Schmo.
Digging food out of garbage, and then asking random people if they have played Prey or Dishonored. Like, what?
Yeah, I think this segment's not going to go so great. We're going to get stabbed at some point.
Yeah, that's like the Dishonored way, man.
I guess that's true. So yeah, I think a 3 makes sense. It's a man. It's
a hard one. If we had a point scale, it might be 3.5 or something, 3.7. I'm with you. It's painful because you could tell it's a well crafted game.
It's
overall.
So well crafted.
I just feel like some of the decisions that they've made really hold it back in terms of its playability. It's worth looking at, like you said, if you're into that thing and you know that about you, that genre or that type of style. But going into it with eyes wide open, knowing that it's going to be a slog if you're not that type of person.
Yeah, I think that's true.
Cool. Well, I feel like we kind of got a little bit rambly there, but we made it to the end. So that'll do it for this episode of Super Robinson Brothers. If you guys have any questions, thoughts, if you totally disagree with us, you can join our Discord. You can find that on our website, or email us at podcast@superrobinsonbros.com.
And hey, you can also find us all over the internet on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, all those good places. It's the easiest way to keep up with us. Don't forget to rate and subscribe to us here on the podcast, iTunes, podcasts, or wherever the heck you listen to your podcast. We really appreciate it. We don't do much advertising at all for Super Robinson Bros. So it all just travels on word of mouth. If you like it, tell someone.
That's right.
And I think that's
Walk around the streets telling people, digging through garbage cans, or whatever you want to do. We won't judge.
Whatever you want. Cool. Well, thanks,
right.
Nick. I'll talk to you next time.
Thanks, everybody, for listening. See ya.
Bye-bye.